Hello and welcome to Accelerating Horizon VDI Deployments through VMware's Cloud Foundation. My name is David Davis, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join us on today's VMware webinar presented by VMware and Actual Tech Media. Before we jump into it, I want to point out that we want this to be a really educational event, so we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event. So throughout the event, as Josh is presenting, please use the questions box there as much as you'd like. Whatever pops into your head about VDI, about Cloud Foundation, post it in there, and we'll be answering all those questions, as many as we can get to at the end of the event. We'll also be giving away a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event after today's Q&A. So as I said, my name's David Davis. I'm David M. Davis on Twitter, and I'm proud to be joined by Mr. Josh Townsend, who is from VMware. Josh will tell you a little bit more about himself here in just a moment. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be covering the key benefits that will be achieved from deploying VMware Cloud Foundation. You'll learn how VMware's Cloud Foundation can help to simplify and speed up deployment of VMware's Horizon VDI solutions specifically. And as I said, I hope you get all your questions answered and have a chance to win a very cool prize. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to today's presenter, Mr. Josh Townsend. Take it away, Josh.
Cool. Thank you, David. So my name is Josh Townsend. We established that already. I am a senior technical marketing architect for VMware. I'm in our integrated systems business unit, and I focus almost exclusively now on VMware Cloud Foundation and its place within the software-defined data center. I've been around the VMware community for quite some time as a partner, as a customer, and now obviously working for VMware. I've been involved in the DC VMUG for almost a decade now, and have been vExpert and EMC Elect. In my free time, I'm a volunteer firefighter and EMT in Ashburn, Virginia, which is right in the heart of Washington, D.C.'s tech corridor. As a fun fact, about 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through the Ashburn area. So if the internet burns down, you can blame me. So the agenda that I want to go through today, we're going to start with an overview of VMware Cloud Foundation. It's a fairly new product, and I understand that not everyone is going to be familiar with it. So before we dive in deep on the Horizon part of it, I want to make sure that the pool is deep enough before we dive in head first. So let's do that. Then we'll cover what Horizon looks like on top of VMware Cloud Foundation, and then a little bit of what's new and how the latest version of Cloud Foundation has changed the Horizon deployment landscape. And as David said, feel free to ask questions along the way. Just pop them into the question box. I'm trying to keep an eye on it, and David will do the same and interrupt me if I'm rambling on too long and ignoring a question. So with that, let's get started. What is Cloud Foundation? So Cloud Foundation is a universal workload platform built for today and the future, right? We can all read the title here. Let's break it down. So Cloud Foundation takes vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, wraps them together into a new product, leveraging the power of a new software component called the SDDC Manager to automate both deployment as well as lifecycle management of those core components of vSphere, vSAN, and NSX. And so on top of this new platform, we can deploy all sorts of cool stuff. Horizon, which we're going to look at today, the entire vRealize suite. You can deploy the integrated OpenStack on top of it. You can deploy containers and new things, Internet of Things and whatever comes to mind. And with Cloud Foundation, you deploy it on premises, that is in your private cloud, it is your private cloud, or you can consume it in the public cloud. And you see here 6 of our public cloud providers that are already online today offering Cloud Foundation as a service. And so what value does Cloud Foundation bring to you? Well, number one, it's a standardized architecture. We have built Cloud Foundation against the VMware validated designs. And so all the best practices that you would find in VMware's validated designs, and if you haven't seen those, a quick Google will point you at them, basically blueprints on how to build your private cloud, step by step on how to do vSphere, vSAN, NSX, vRealize, Horizon, etc., the right way every time. So we've built it against that, but we've then taken Cloud Foundation and made it an integrated stack. So instead of just a bunch of individual components that you consume, they're all wrapped together into a new product. It's an engineered integration of that entire software-defined data center stack. And then finally, using the SDDC manager component, which you saw on the previous slide, we make the software-defined data center simple to operate. We bring lifecycle management that automates day zero, right? That's the initial deployment of your software-defined data center, of your basic infrastructure, all the way through day two operations like patching and updating is all built right into the product. And so just a quick flow chart on what it would actually look like to deploy your private cloud infrastructure on Cloud Foundation. Number one, physical deployment, right? Somebody's got to do the dirty work of bringing in the servers and the boxes and popping in. So plug it in, turn it on. SDDC Manager, as soon as it powers up, starts to look at what components are there and what components are healthy and identifies any that might not be, right? Did a DIMM wiggle loose during shipping? That kind of thing happens. So once we have power on validation, we ask you, the customer, to provide some simple inputs. Give us some things like your Active Directory servers, your DNS servers, an NTP server, etc. Very simple inputs. And then from there, we build out a management cluster. And if you're familiar with the VMware validated designs, one of the tenets is that we have management components separate from the workloads that they're actually managing. So we build that management cluster for you, and then we are workload ready. You can begin to deploy your real running workloads or migrate your running workloads onto your Cloud Foundation platform in a construct that we call the workload domain. So you'll see a little bit more of workload domains and what that means here as we go forward. So not only do we automate the deployment of compute, and that is your ESXi, your vCenter, and platform services controllers, and the vSAN that goes with those ESXi servers, and NSX, but in the latest version of Cloud Foundation, that's version 2.3, we also automate the vRealize suite. So you get things like vRealize operations and vRealize automation completely automated in their deployment and management. So when you're ready to buy Cloud Foundation, there's a couple ways you can do it. And I'll walk you through what those are. The first way is to buy some vSAN ready nodes from your favorite vendor. The 6 that you see up here today have qualified nodes available, and we're about ready to announce several more coming on, so I'll need to shrink some logos to make some more room on this slide. So you buy your vSAN ready node, and you buy your qualified networking. So you see the choices you have there for those. You assemble the components yourself. You put them in the racks, cable them up according to our wiring diagrams, powered up, and off you go. You begin to deploy your software-defined data center. So that's option one. Option two is really the easy button, right? Purchase a fully integrated system. Again, most of the same vendors are represented here. They will ship you a rack complete with servers, switches, everything already cabled up. So literally powered on and start using it. They've done all the initial configuration for you. They've done everything. Literally wheel it into your data center, turn it on, and start deploying workloads. Makes it dead simple. The third way is to consume it in the public cloud. So again, the icons that you saw a few slides ago, you simply go to those providers and say, I would like Cloud Foundation as a service. Through their web portal, you provision it, spin it up, and you have capacity within hours. So feel free to check those out as well if you're looking at a public cloud solution or a hybrid cloud solution. So a little bit of marketing fluff now out of the way. Let's get into some of the architecture of Cloud Foundation. So the high-level points that we want to bring out is that it's a modern cloud architecture. It takes all the latest and greatest versions of VMware's private cloud solution and wraps them together into a prescriptive design. We give you fully automated deployment of all the major components in integration with vRealize Suite and VMware Horizon, which we're going to look at a whole lot here as we go forward. So hopefully everyone on the call here today is familiar with those basic building blocks of the VMware software-defined data center, right? Compute virtualization, which is vSphere. Right? I've been a vSphere customer even before it was called vSphere, right? Going way back in the day, 2002, 2003. So this is nothing new. So all the features, all the bells and whistles that you're used to, the high availability in DRS and vMotion and fault tolerance, all of that is available in Cloud Foundation. Then we leverage vSAN, hyperconverged object-based storage. You can deploy Cloud Foundation in an all-flash or a hybrid configuration. With all-flash, you get dedupe and compression, and you get data protection and replication. Again, all the things that you expect to find in a regular vSAN deployment are available and fully automated for you in a Cloud Foundation deployment. The same is true of NSX. I've talked to many customers over the past few years saying, I'd love to try NSX. I hear about microsegmentation and all the distributed switching and routing and edge services that I can deploy in software. That sounds great, but I just don't have the time to deploy it. I just can't get my network guys to spin up and spend the time on it. What can we do? And before Cloud Foundation, the answer was, well, fight through it, right? Get it done, find time. With Cloud Foundation, it's deployed fully for you, ready to use. So it makes it real simple to get that NSX deployment you've wanted to try or use in your production environment for some time out the door, ready to go. And then finally, vRealize Suite. And that's vRealize Operations, Log Insight, Network Insight, vRealize Automation, all deployed automatically, configured, and configured to the point where your ESXi hosts are deployed, your vCenter servers, all the various components are automatically configured to Log Insight, for example, without you having to do anything. We take care of it, right? You have more important things to do with your time than sit there and enter a syslog server on every possible component and hope you got them all. We make sure it's done so you can focus on things that are truly more important in your environment than clicking next, 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 finish. So SDDC Manager is really kind of the glue that holds everything together. With SDDC Manager, we get deployment, configuration, policy-based provisioning, and that's provisioning of the infrastructure itself, as well as the workloads that run on top of it, and lifecycle automation. So that's patching and upgrading of all of those components that are your software-defined data center or your private cloud infrastructure, right? We take care of that to make it simple, so you don't have to worry about, oh geez, do I have this dependency or that dependency? Which do I have to do first? Is it Patch Tuesday already? Right, no more. We can automate that patching and upgrading for you fully. So a few more, little less marketing slides out of the way. Let's get into something that looks slightly more technical for you now. So the physical hardware overview, Cloud Foundation, right? We wheel in a rack, and if you're using your own ready nodes, you're going to rack and stack them yourself. If you're buying an integrated solution, they'll come pre-racked for you. So with Cloud Foundation, the first 4 ready nodes are going to make your management cluster, and so we have a minimum of 4 ready nodes required for any Cloud Foundation deployment. After that, you can deploy a full rack up to 32 ready nodes, and that 32 is the maximum we support with Cloud Foundation. If you buy an integrated solution from some of our partners, they may change those numbers depending on power availability in their racks and that type of thing. So maybe slightly less than 32, but Cloud Foundation itself supports up to 32. We also include 2 top-of-rack switches and a management switch. The management switch is for out-of-band management. It connects your ILO or your DREC or whatever IPMI solution you have. So once those are in place, the management workload domain lives on top of the first 4 servers. We can increase that if we have more management components that we need capacity for. And then we start to carve up that capacity. We have virtual infrastructure workload domains that runs basic VMs. We have VDI workload domains that run your virtual desktops using VMware Horizon. And then we can expand the capacity of those workload domains by consuming the servers that are not yet allocated. So that's just 1 rack. We can expand the solution out to 8 racks total. And when we do 8 racks, we add 2 more switches in. These are called rack interconnect switches. Those become highly connected or highly available to all of the racks in the solution and take care of routing our traffic up and down, northbound, southbound to the rest of our network. So a very scalable solution. When we scale out to additional racks, those workload domains can expand across racks to consume the capacity that you have across the entire Cloud Foundation footprint. So a whole lot of capacity, a whole lot of scalability makes it very easy to grow the solution. Start small and grow from there. So that's the basic hardware, right? And that has vSphere, vSAN, and then we put NSX on top of it, all managed by SDDC Manager. And then we put vRealize Suite on top of it. The vRealize Suite components are going to live in that management workload domain. Horizon Suite, so that's Horizon 7, and at volumes are optional components then that we would layer on top of that deployment in those workload domains that you saw on the previous slide. So a quick look here at the various components that are included in Cloud Foundation version 2.3 and what you can expect Cloud Foundation to do for you in regards to these individual products. So you see the first 7 components there, ESXi, vCenter, vSAN, etc., are the latest and greatest versions. The deployment of them is all fully automated. That is, you click next, finish, just a couple times based on some simple input that you provide. We provision all of that for you, right? And that's going to include Log Insight, Horizon, and app volumes. Patching and upgrading is included on most of it today. There are some patching and upgrading for the add-on components, those optional components that we do not yet automate. But stay tuned because our goal is to make the private cloud simple for you. So I would hope to see those things coming at some point in the future. And then a quick look at when these individual components are deployed. You'll hear me mention bring up a few times. Bring up is when we take that rack that has been wheeled into our data center, or the rack that you've populated with your vSAN ready nodes and switches. The rack that you buy from an integrated partner is pre-imaged, right? ESXi and everything are staged for you. Bring up is let's deploy it with some NTP server settings and some DNS server settings, et cetera, right? It's just a quick process that turns it on. You see all those things are made ready for you. Some other pieces are deployed during workload domain creation. So when you say, hey, I'm ready to run workloads and this is about how much I need to do it, that's when we deploy those. So some of those come on demand. And then other ones are kind of a later on demand. You can add the vRealize operations and automation whenever you want. You push it in and they automate themselves in their deployment. Patching and upgrading still manual, but deployment of them is really on demand whenever you're ready for them. So workload domains, these are kind of the key building block that is going to be user facing, right? User meaning the cloud administrator that gets in and provisions workloads day to day. These are going to be the unit of operation that's going to be of the most interest to you. And so breaking down workload domains, what are they? Quite simply, they are a dedicated vSphere cluster. So they're ESXi hosts that have vSAN and we deploy NSX on top of it. Those clusters are deployed through SDDC Manager for you. We have three types: the management workload domain, which is ready for you out of the gates. It's there on every deployment. Then we have virtual infrastructure and VDI. We already looked at those. You can run up to 15 individual workload domains in parallel on across the 8 maximum racks that we have in Cloud Foundation. And you can create, expand, and delete those workload domains independently. Each of those workload domains that you create are going to have their own dedicated vCenter server, their own dedicated NSX manager, and an NSX controller cluster. So they run somewhat independently, so you can create different workload domains for different purposes. Maybe one for test dev, one for production, maybe one for a specific set of apps, such as SAP. You can have an SAP workload domain or a VDI workload domain that just has your Horizon stuff. And they all run independently, with the exception that they do share enhanced link mode. They all go back to the same platform services controllers. So let's break down these workload domains just a bit more for you. The management workload domain looks like this. We take the first 4 nodes. Again, it's deployed automatically during that bring up process for you. You can expand it to more than 4 nodes if you have a whole lot of management stuff that you want to put into it. It runs your infrastructure components. It has SDDC Manager, your platform services controllers, your vCenter servers, NSX Manager, the vRealize suite if you choose to deploy that, and certain Horizon components. Not the Horizon desktops, but the management components for Horizon. That's going to be things like your connection servers and your unified access gateways, that type of thing, will run in the management domain. And that keeps us from having a situation where the things being managed, that is the virtual desktops in a VDI workload domain, are being managed by something that's also managing the infrastructure, right? So we create a separation of duties, if you will, to make sure that we have high availability across the solution. So that's the management workload domain. The virtual infrastructure workload domain is what you're going to deploy your basic VMs into. That's going to be a dedicated vSphere cluster. It's going to be a minimum of 3 hosts. If you want to increase the failures to tolerate on vSAN, obviously you're going to need some more hosts to do that. If you want additional redundancy, or if you just want more capacity, you can add more hosts to it. It's going to have its own separate vCenter server. That is going to live in the management workload domain, but the workloads themselves, again, will be in the VI workload domains that you create. vSAN is deployed. We have 8 disks per controller and 5 disk groups per host, so we can really cram a lot of storage into a node and make it a very scalable solution. Each workload domain ends up with one vSAN data store. So all the workloads that you put into that one domain will live in that vSAN data store unless you choose to attach external storage. We do support IP-based storage, so NFS or iSCSI could be plugged in, connected to the workload domain after the initial deployment. And as I mentioned earlier, we do a full deployment of NSX for you. So NSX becomes completely ready to use for the workload domain, for the workloads that are in it. So you see here an NSX edge is pictured right in the center of this slide. All the features that you would expect from an NSX edge, load balancing, DHCP, on and on, are available for you, your workloads to consume right out of the gates. So the process of deploying a workload domain, if you think about what would it mean in your own environment today, right? Sans automation, you're deploying things manually. You're installing ESXi, you're deploying vCenter server, you're deploying and configuring vSAN and NSX and on, right? It's a lot of tasks. I give you a sample here of 50 tasks that I quickly identified. These are the things that I would have to do manually. All these are done for you in a single workflow. When you say, I want a workload domain, it does all these things for you automatically and more. So the virtual infrastructure workload domain becomes the building block that we use to then do a virtual desktop infrastructure workload domain. So here's where we start to get into some of the Horizon stuff. So before we break down the Horizon workload domains and the components that are a part of it, step back and say, why would I care about deploying Horizon with Cloud Foundation? Well, speed is really the number one thing for me. It's the speed at which you can deploy a full Horizon environment. I think today, all those 50 tasks plus more that we just looked at doesn't include any of the Horizon stuff. We want to do Horizon on top of that. We fully automate the Horizon deployment itself with Cloud Foundation. So in a matter of a few clicks, you get an entire Horizon environment deployed, ready to rock, fully deployed against the VMware validated design. So you're not just looking at the speed at which you can click next, finish across all those components. You're looking at the speed, the time it would take you to study the VMware validated designs, to study documentation and deploy it manually. That all goes away with Cloud Foundation. And really speed translates into reallocated time. Skip a couple bubbles over here, right? When you can do things in less time, you have more time in which you can focus on things that add more value to your business. So, for example, I've seen a lot of Horizon deployments where folks haven't really spent the time to figure out app volumes and app delivery. They haven't figured out user profile management yet. They haven't figured out things like group policies, right? They've spent so much time just getting it running and doing care and feeding that they don't have the time that they want. We give that time back to you. So then look at a couple of these other bubbles, right? Reliability becomes a huge thing. Can you reliably deploy, consistently deploy Horizon environments on demand, right? A new business group comes to you and says, hey, we want to deploy VDI to support a new accounting app. Can you do that? And you say, yeah, it would take me months and months and months, and I hope I get it right each time I click it, right? That's the old way of doing it. Now you say, yep, I got it. It's going to be perfect. Guarantee it. Click, 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 done. Right? It's there and ready. It's done the same time, same way every time, so you can be sure it's going to run perfectly for you. And then finally, advanced features, right? It's not enough just to deploy Horizon and say, oh, I hope it works, right? We look at things like app volumes. Are you using that? If not, why not, right? Well, I don't have the time. Well, now you have the time, but good news is you don't even need the time for app volumes because we deploy that automatically for you. You can focus on things like deploying it, deploying your real apps, configuring your real apps, building the app volumes themselves, the app stacks, instead of deploying the individual pieces of the infrastructure and spending your time there. Other things like NSX, right? Microsegmentation of your workload domains. We can do that for you. In fact, we do it for you automatically. You can do a whole lot more with a whole lot less. So enough of the marketing fluff again. So VDI workload domains. Again, it's built on top of a virtual infrastructure workload domain. So it is a dedicated vSphere cluster with a unique vCenter server. Then we deploy the Horizon components. The Horizon components are installed into the management workload domain. That is your connection servers, the SQL server to support it, etc. And we fully automate the deployment of all of those components. vSphere, Platform Services Controller, vCenter, ESXi, vSAN, NSX, Horizon, app volumes. There's also User Environment Manager comes as a part of that in the background, NSX microsegmentation rules, all that. So today we can support up to 14 VDI workload domains. And people say, where 14 is an odd number, why? Well, in vSphere 6.5 update 1, the number of vCenter servers that you can link in link mode is limited to 15. We use 1 for the management workload domain, that leaves 14 left for other workload domains. So 14 is the max, but if you say, well, I want 3 virtual infrastructure workload domains, and then how many more VDI ones can I create? Well, we subtract the 3 from the 14. You get 11 more VDI that you can create. So it's kind of a give and take back and forth depending on VDI versus VI. Okay, and then each VDI workload domain supports up to 4,000 desktops. So we'll let you do the math because math in real time is not my strong suit, but it's a whole lot of desktops that we can support in a single Cloud Foundation deployment. And your environment is not limited to a single Cloud Foundation deployment. If you wanted to spin up a second one with another 8 racks or another one in another location, by all means, feel free to do so. That's fully supported. So when we add that VDI workload domain in, we're looking at another 60 or so tasks. I think I missed a few here, so we bump that number up some, right? We do a whole lot for you that you don't have to think about doing. You don't have to think about doing it the same way each time because it is done for you the same way each time. Okay, so what's new with VDI on Cloud Foundation 2.3, which as of today is the latest version of Cloud Foundation. With VCF 2.3, we're deploying Horizon 7.2. With Horizon 7.2, you get instant clone support, Blast Extreme, App Volumes integration, help desk tool, all the stuff that, if you're familiar with Horizon 7.2, all the new features that came with it, that's what we can do. We add external SQL support, external SSL cert support. With a VDI workload domain in VCF 2.3, we're deploying NSX load balancers for you automatically and configuring them to load balance your connection servers and your unified access gateways. That just happens magically. The unified access gateways are deployed for internet accessible desktops, so kind of a DMZ type deployment where you have load balancing and security coming through NSX for you. We take care of DHCP and VHCP relays. You can control what DHCP traffic goes where, right? Which ties in somewhat to microsegmentation. Then microsegmentation is done fully for you, and I'll give you a look at what that looks like as we click through some product demo slides coming up. And then app volumes and UEM, I already mentioned, are deployed for you automatically, and that came new with 2.3. So breaking down the workload domain a little bit more for you, here's a quick diagram of the components. So you see in the light blue in the upper right-hand corner are the Horizon components that are deployed into that management workload domain, along with load balancers in the dark gray at the top, and a vCenter server and NSX manager dedicated to each VDI workload domain. Within the VDI workload domain itself, we have various network segments that are created for you. These are all the segments you would expect in any vSphere deployment. Management network, a vMotion network, vSAN network, a VXLAN segment, as well as a VDI network for your desktops to live on. Those are all done for you and all connected up to your top-of-rack switches, and the top-of-rack switches configured for you automatically. Now, when we deploy the VDI workload domain, we think about redundancy. So we deploy redundant connection servers. Again, those are load balanced by NSX. We deploy redundant unified access gateways, and then optional components. We can deploy a full Active Directory setup for you if you want. You also have the choice of pointing it to an existing Active Directory. So if you're doing a proof of concept, use the one that we automate for you. If you're deploying it in production and want to tie everything into an existing, by all means do so. The same is true of a SQL server. You can have a SQL server spun up for you within the VDI workload domain to support the events database and the composer database, or you can point it to an existing SQL server and we'll just create the databases there. Also, app volumes and the UEM servers that are tied to it are optional. You can choose yes, deploy them, or no, I just want a plain vanilla Horizon VDI environment. And then the components, I've alluded to this a few times, but there are shared components. So you see the platform services controllers, every Cloud Foundation instance, so up to the 8 full racks, all share 2 platform services controllers, so all workload domains, vCenter servers tie back to them. We have redundant vRealize Log Insight and vRealize Operation servers, NSX Manager and Controller, All the various components live there. And really what you see here is workload domains coexisting. So the VDI workload domain here in green, its components live in the management workload domain, and workload domain X, right, 1 through 14, also have their components in the management workload domain, and everyone is happy and all live together perfectly happy. The final bullet point here on the right side too is a good one to point out, is that any VDI any workload domain, doesn't have to just be VDI, but any Cloud Foundation workload domain can be configured as a VRI's automation endpoint. So if you want to build workflows against it, if you want to automate things for your developers so they can deploy a workload domain and then populate it with their actual workloads, you can do all that through VRA and make a very cool automated environment for your folks to work inside of. Alrighty, so now let's do a walkthrough of the actual process of creating a VDI workload domain. I've blabbed on long enough about the features and values. I'm a very visual person, so seeing what is done for you and seeing the ease at which it's done, to me, has a lot of value, so hopefully it does that for you. We do have a few prereqs before you get started. Obviously, you need a server, a rack in place with some servers in it to start. And then we also ask for some basic things like Windows components. We need a volume license ISO of Windows 2012 R2. We also need your Horizon View parent template built. We don't do all that for you. We expect you to build that base Windows 7 or 10 OVA that's hardened and locked down and optimized however you choose to optimize your desktops for your users. We're going to need some volume license keys and a volume license activation server to activate those keys, an Active Directory OU and a Horizon service account, and a SQL server if you choose to not deploy one through the wizard. If you want to point to an existing SQL server, you'll need that. The same is true of Active Directory. You can point to the existing one, as I already said. And then for the networking side of it, we're going to need a VLAN and a subnet for the desktops to live on. And then if you choose to have DMZ access, and that's through the Unified Access Gateways or security servers, if you want to go legacy, we'll need a VLAN and a subnet for those as well. So you'll have to reach out to your network people and make sure those are available on your network core, and then we'll configure those for you as we deploy your workload domain. So those are the prereqs. There's also some settings that you can come in and tweak before you deploy your workload domain. You can change the Active Directory name scheme. So right now, default is horizon.local. If you want to make it mycorp.local, have at it, right? Have fun. Change it to whatever you want. There's naming prefixes, and there's some server sizing. So how big do you want your connection servers? The default would be number of processors would be 4 and 10 gigs of RAM and 80 gig hard drive. You can kind of see those settings here in the screenshot right in the very center of it. If you want to bump those up to support more connections, or if you want to dial them down because it's just a small POC, you can do that. So a bunch of other settings that you can play with to increase or decrease the desktop density on the cluster itself. So if you want to over allocate, you can drive those settings up. If you want to guarantee performance, obviously dial them down and guarantee your users have the resources they need on those physical hosts. So once you have all your settings locked in, you start the Add Workload Domain wizard. And so, very simple, the screenshot you see here is of the SDDC Manager dashboard. The SDDC Manager is just a simple web-based interface that you use to provision and monitor your physical infrastructure, the Cloud Foundation infrastructure. It has a big button at the top that says Add Workload Domain, and we have two options, Configure VDI or Configure Virtual Infrastructure. So we would choose Configure VDI. Next step is just a quick reminder that, hey, there are some prereqs. We already looked at those. You're going to need your Windows components, those default values in the settings screen, and the network settings. So once you have all those, off you go. Very first step, provide some basic topology information. We'll give the workload domain a name. Step back here one click. Sorry about that. We give it a name. We choose our deployment type. So deployment type could be, hey, just reserve resources, right? Build the Horizon infrastructure, but don't give me any desktops. Or if you're feeling like you would rather be sitting on a beach, you can say, hey, DCF, deploy the desktops for me. I don't even want to think about that part of it. Just give me a full Horizon environment that I can use this afternoon. We choose our desktop type: linked clones, instant clones, or full clones. We support all three types. The assignment type of floating desktops or dedicated desktops is chosen for you. And then the access type. Do you just want it on the internet, or do you want to be able to access those desktops from anywhere? In which case, we would deploy either unified access gateways, or you see a checkbox here for using the legacy security servers if for some reason you want to keep those in place. So because I chose deployed desktops, and instant clones and floating desktops and corporate network deployment here on the screen, the very first VDI desktop pool it will create, because it will actually create those desktops for me. I chose that first option. Will have those settings. That doesn't mean that they all will have those settings. Once the Horizon environment is deployed, you, the Horizon administrator, can go in and say, okay, now I want more desktop pools, and I want this one to be a full clone with dedicated desktops, and another one to be linked clones with floating desktops, or a different use case. You can do that within Horizon once it's deployed if you choose. These settings, again, are just for that very first desktop pool that you create. So then we have some Active Directory and SQL settings. We can, for both of them, choose an existing SQL server that would point out to something that already exists on our corporate network, or create new ones that live within the Cloud Foundation environment itself. Simple DNS forwarding IP and domain admin password for that new Active Directory that we're going to create. We choose whether or not we want app volumes deployed. That's a simple checkbox. And then we size our virtual desktops. So here I want 100 virtual desktops, each with 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. Very simple sizing. This is just for that first desktop pool. After that, I can grow it and add more desktop pools if I choose manually. We configure our data center network. So here's the custom configuration that we're going to put in. We're going to give it a name, give it a VLAN, give it our subnets. We do have a DHCP relay agent that's going to live on the same network that your desktops will live. That will relay DHCP requests out to a DHCP server that lives in the management workload domain. So we're giving that an IP, and then excluding any that we need to keep the network guys happy. With that, we then move on to our DMZ. This is going to be for our unified access gateways. Really the same settings that we just looked at. Once that is in place, we configure some names for our connection servers, our load balancers, and if I had chosen to deploy app volumes, when I captured these screenshots, you'd also have a DNS name for app volumes. So at this point, I would toggle over to my DNS server and pop those names and IPs that are given here into my DNS server so that can be resolved by users out on my network. You do have the option too of deploying an external DHCP server if you have one existing on your network. Very easy though to deploy that internal one and just kind of keep the VDI environment self-segregated. Not touching anything else is a great way to go, especially for POCs. Then some very simple ISO uploading is done. So I have my Windows ISO and I give it a license key. I also upload that Windows 10 OVA template that I have here. This one, you see in the name, the center blue bar, as Windows 10_LC for linked clone. So I did install the Horizon agent inside my template and made sure that linked clone support was enabled inside that template before I uploaded it. And then I provide my password for that OVA. Once I'm ready, click Next, and I review my settings. And once the settings look good, off I go, and the 2 workloads kick off. So you see the top workload that I have expanded is the virtual infrastructure resource pool, or the workload domain is being deployed. That's all the underlying infrastructure, the first set of 50 tasks that we looked at earlier in this webcast. And then after that, we have the VDI resource pool, which is deploying the 60-some tasks for the full VDI environment. That's deploying all the Horizon components and the desktops. When those both register successful, I have a full VDI environment ready to go. So both are successful, and here's my full VDI environment. You see that I have View Administrator opened up here. I have the very first desktop pool. It's an automated pool with floating assignment using linked clones, just like we said in the wizard. It's 100 desktops are ready to go. See that on the right-hand side, and it's a fully configured Horizon environment. And then a quick jump over here to my NSX settings to go with it. one thing I like to point out is that microsegmentation is done for you automatically. I spent quite some time before joining VMware as a consultant doing a lot of VDI work, a lot of Horizon implementations, and never once did I have a customer say, gee, let's just do microsegmentation. We've got the time and money, let's figure it out. Right? Never happened. I had people ask about it, but just never got there. With Cloud Foundation, it happens automatically. There's 26 rule sets configured automatically with Cloud Foundation version 2.3 that does full microsegmentation on all the components that are deployed as part of the workload domain. So you have complete security across the network in the environment. You can make sure that the desktops can't talk to the SQL server that was deployed and do some sort of crazy injection attack or whatever your users come up with. Right? We all know users can't be trusted. So with microsegmentation, we're secure. And then, of course, you can build on this to meet the needs of your specific environment if you so choose. We saw a little bit about the DHCP relay. So a quick diagram before we finish up the NSX piece of this. We have an NSX DHCP relay server that's deployed in the VDI workload domain that relays the DHCP requests, offers, and acknowledgments to a DHCP server that's an NSX edge that lives in the management workload domain. You also see load balancers that are deployed in the management workload domain. We have 3 separate load balancers or 3 separate NSX edges. It's really 6 because they're deployed in high availability mode. 3 that you would actually manage, and then shadow ones that are ready to take over if one dies. But there's one for connection servers, one for your unified access gateways, and one for app volumes. So full redundancy, microsegmentation, everything out of the gates ready to go. So that's what the deployment looks like. So at this point, I'm going to pop up here some resources. Oh, maybe we have to do a winter thing first. But then we'll jump over to a resources slide to show you some various things you can do for follow-up. And at this point, I see some questions that came in. So let's see if we can answer some of those. If you have questions, feel free to pop them into the questions window as part of the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar pane that's open on your desktop. And as you're doing that, waiting for the questions to come in, a couple things to point out. We do have a Cloud Foundation blog, so follow that. There's a Twitter account, that's VMWVCF. That's a fairly busy Twitter account, so subscribe to that and follow along, and feel free to retweet. There's also a YouTube channel that somehow I didn't put a link to up here. So come to my next webinar and you'll be sure to see a link to that. Otherwise, just go to YouTube, search VMware Cloud Foundation, and it'll pop right up for you. There is a poster too. If you want to kind of dive into some of the diagrams that I presented today, as well as a whole bunch more, it's a full-size poster. Feel free to study it. If you really want to get crazy, go down to your FedEx, Kinko's, or Staples and print it out full size and post it on your cubicle wall and really have a great time with it. With that, David, if you want to handle a drawing while I start to look at some of these questions, we can get some of these done.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation. Thanks, Josh. I love the diagrams, lots of detailed info. And so, yeah, we have a lot of questions rolling in. Please keep them coming. And before we get to those, I want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. That is going out to Cynthia Bialer-Levine, last name Bialerlevine. Congratulations, Cynthia. We'll reach out to you to deliver your gift card, and best of luck to everyone on our next event. And with that, yeah, Josh, why don't you bring it back to those resources there on the screen. One resource I wanted to ask you about is I did a little search here while you were presenting, and there's a VMware hands-on lab, Lab 1844 on modernizing infrastructure with VMware Cloud Foundation. Is that a good way to kind of get your hands dirty with Cloud Foundation?
Yeah, it certainly is. The one caveat on that, for folks who are regular users of our hands-on labs, you expect to come in and find a full-blown lab environment that you can touch and break and do whatever you want with. First time through, you'll probably follow the lab manual. After that, you may go in and tweak things and explore somewhat on your own. Cloud Foundation being what it is, right? It's the full software-defined data center, complete with servers and switching and everything else that it expects to automate need to be there. So it gets a little tricky to do that in a nested environment. We've done it, but it's huge. The hands-on lab people don't like huge lab pods, especially when you think about VMworld and spinning up a couple hundred at a time. We don't want to break stuff, so it is a simulated environment. It's basically a screen click-through. That said, it's worth your time. Spend some time on it, and we are currently working on a new updated version of that for VMworld 2018.
Very cool. I look forward to that. So I've got a lot of questions for you here. Are there any questions that came in that you want to handle first?
I think we'll just probably take them in order here. Let's see. So can we get a copy of the slide deck? Jeanette asked that. David, do you send those out automatically to the attendees?
They don't go out automatically, but I will contact anyone who requests it and send that out. Yes.
Cool. So a couple from David. David, you're going to make these ones hard to answer for me. What's the bare minimum dollar sign to get out the door with Cloud Foundation? Just a basic setup. I don't have a good number to give you. It's going to depend on who you purchase from and what your discount rates are, on and on, right? But the bare minimum, if you want to try to work through the math yourself, is going to be 4 vSAN ready nodes, and then 3 switches, right? There's going to be 2 top of rack switches, and we tell you which switches are supported. If you go to our product page, you can find a link to the compatibility guide that says which ready nodes are compatible, which switches are compatible. You choose those, figure out the price, and then do it. And then the price for the VMware licensing itself. And again, that's dependent on how you buy it, if you're a nonprofit or not. So very hard to get just a generic number on it, but you can kind of work backwards based on your purchasing. And then David, again, how granular is the permissioning for vRealize automation? It's as granular as you want it to be. I know that's not a terribly specific answer, but VRA is incredibly customizable. We deploy it out of the gate. It has some very basic settings. From there, you build out your business owners, your business groups, and do your permissions, and however it fits your environment best. Tyson asks, is there a certification for this yet? Not yet for users. There is a partner certification that is almost ready. So stay tuned for that if you are a VMware partner, but a customer-focused certification, nothing yet. Does the DHCP support setup support writing to an external IPAN like SolarWinds? Not out of the box, but if you start linking in VRA, there is the ability to write to things like SolarWinds. So you could do it if you wanted. As of version 2.3, no, but stay tuned. Let's see, Tim asks, do you have to be the full suite of systems in order to do all this to work? So if he has a SAN and infrastructure already and you don't want to replace it, what do you do? So you have some servers, you have some switches. If you have servers and switches that are already on the Cloud Foundation compatibility guide, by all means, you can use them. By the same token, if you already own vSphere, vSAN, NSX, you can bring those licenses to Cloud Foundation. We do a fair value market conversion type of thing. So you're basically then only adding in SDDC Manager. Maybe you buy vRealize or Horizon as additional components. So you can leverage what you already have and build it up. That said, a lot of the automation power is from day zero. So if your existing resources are already running workloads, you'll have to find a place for those workloads to go while you repurpose that equipment, image everything up with Cloud Foundation, and make it available to run workloads. So that kind of plays into how well does a new Cloud Foundation setup play with existing vCenter, vRealize, NSX setups. So is it in parallel? Can you integrate it? It really is in parallel. We have no idea the way your stuff is currently set up. Hopefully you follow the VMware validated designs, but a lot of customers built their infrastructures and have been maintaining them for years before the VMware validated designs were released to the customers. So it's tough to say what you have. We may have to run it in parallel, do some workload migration. There are some opportunities to link environments together using some of the hybrid cloud technologies that are available, but that's going to be case-by-case basis, and that's where professional services is probably going to come into play for you. So Dustin asks, if we start with 4 nodes in our VCF environment, it's his understanding that Horizon would have to be deployed the traditional way within the single workload domain. So that's a slide I didn't include in this deck, and I'll probably will include it in the future. Dustin, it's a great question. So we have 2 ways to deploy Cloud Foundation. The first is a consolidated approach. With a consolidated architecture, we take those first 4 nodes that make the management workload domain, and then we use vSphere resource pools to carve up pseudo workload domains. So instead of a full dedicated cluster for each workload domain, we combine it all into a management workload domain. If you choose to do that, that is correct. Horizon isn't going to run inside of that consolidated architecture. You would need to deploy additional physical hosts to support that and create a true VDI workload domain. So it's fairly easy to convert from that consolidated architecture to the standard architecture where you scale out more. It's quite a simple process. So you could buy 3 more hosts at a minimum, deploy Horizon on it, and grow from there, and now you're into the standard architecture. But if you want to start consolidated and you still want to run Horizon, you lose the automation that Cloud Foundation provides in deploying Horizon, but you still could deploy it manually, right? Spin up your connection servers and NSX edges and whatever else you want. You can do it manually. We don't prohibit that. So there is, I already mentioned, Tyson, a partner university class is coming soon. I don't have the release date for that as of right now. And then David Bass asks, are the NSX rules all firewall based, or can they work with Service Composer? I didn't include a screenshot of Service Composer. We fully populate out Service Composer to define all the services that are part of the Horizon environment, and then apply the rules based on those services. So it's a very well thought out, very detailed NSX implementation when it comes to microsegmentation. So very good question there. And I think that's all the questions that I currently have in the question box. So feel free to pop more in for those of you who are still on the call. I'm happy to take those, or feel free to reach out to me afterwards through Twitter or whatever communication method you choose. I can put my contact info back up there if you want to see that. So with that, David, anything else? Do you want to do a drawing?
I did announce the winner. Yeah, it was Cynthia. Yeah, and
congratulations, Cynthia. I was busy reading questions, forgot to pay attention.
Yeah, so great presentation, Josh. Again, I think that's all the questions we have on today's webinar. But if anyone else has any more questions, of course, feel free to reach out to Josh. Check out the resources that are on the screen there, and watch for more great content coming from VMware Cloud Foundation's group and from Actual Tech Media. So thanks for being on today, Josh.
Thank you, David. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah, thanks to everyone in the audience. Have a great day.